Welcome to Ticker Tidbits. Kate and Alex in the studio today.
How's it going, guys?
We're going to talk about Alex's favorite
We're going to talk about me. All about me. You're going to like it.
We actually are. Alex recently did a new metabolic test, and we're going to analyze that in relation to how he's training and see what that leads us to.
All right, let's get into it.
Stay tuned.
We should probably do one more take where I'm not an asshole.
No, I like that. It's relatable. It's good. Do it. You did a PNOE test this week.
I did. I was not happy about it.
You finally, took the leap to do a metabolic test.
I know. It's not good that I'm a coach and I hate doing them so much.
Okay.
And I tell other people to do them.
Yeah, and so that's what ended up happening. Now, I had been on your case to do this because we've changed your nutrition around a lot.
Changed nutrition, a lot has changed since, looking here, last PNOE was in October of last year.
Embarrassing.
October 26th of last year.
All right, so you did a PNOE, then we made it through the holidays, then we made it through the open, and we've talked about that in previous podcasts of your motivations around then. After coming out of the open, what you wanted to get to, and you've changed your focus immensely.
Yeah, everything has kind of changed since the open.
Exactly. So you're in a much more serious training mode now.
Yeah.
For this next year. And nutrition you have dialed in. You started weighing, you started measuring.
Yep. Went to Chris with all my food and was like, Chris, make it better, please. Because it's okay, but it needs to be better.
So I really wanted to know, because you had increased your calories and changed things around, and you started losing weight.
So much food. Yeah.
Which is an interesting thing, because I don't know who's out there watching this. Like a competitive athlete might see like you did, of like, I don't want to lose weight, I don't want to lose muscle mass.
Yeah. Well, what happened was I was sitting comfortably at like 220 pounds.
Right.
And then over the course of like 10 days, I dropped down 6 pounds, like out of nowhere. And this, I was it wasn't like I was 220 and was trending down. I was at 220 for like 2 months.
Yeah. And
then all of a sudden I was at 215, 214. I was like, oh God, that's not good. And I dropped down to under 8% body fat. And I was like, that's like, as cool as it is to look that nice, like I feel like shit training right now.
It wasn't as sustainable, and having the measurements to understand why it wasn't sustainable. So I know I was on you to do a ramp up test. It didn't have to be a maximal test. I wanted to get an idea of what you were.
You say that every time, but every time it's a max test.
It's a maximal.
It's like, oh, we don't have to go all the way this time. We'll stop like before you die.
I know, but
then I die.
It's so good.
And you're like, ah ha ha, you did it.
Yeah, that's how I get you to do them every so often.
Yeah.
But my biggest motivation out of that was to see what's actually happening while you're training, what you're burning for fuel.
It's just a lot.
It's a lot. Like, we could have guessed it was a lot, and we could guess that we changed up, what you're eating. We changed the capacity of what you were doing, and then you're reaching goals. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So let's do a check-in and make sure that we're on track, and then guide what we're going to do next based on that assessment.
Yeah, because as much as I hate doing the PNOEs, I was concerned that I was working in too high of a heart rate. I was working unsustainably.
Right. Because what the metabolic...
I was just destroying my metabolic profile.
Yeah.
And sure, I'm getting faster, but that's because I'm just getting better at suffering and sitting in threshold and shit like that.
Which is why we do those metabolic tests, so we know specifically what you're doing when you train. So we know when you're using oxygen and burning fat and absorbing your training, which is really important to you. And then we know when you hit into those top energy systems, which is also really important to you, because to train energy systems effectively, we need to know the time domains that you're training within. Mm-hmm. Zone 5 should not be a 20-minute effort.
No, God, no.
So we needed to know where your zones were as you started hyper-analyzing, all right, you're going to do all this monostructural work that needs to be aerobic base building. Mm-hmm. But then we need to know what your base was. So what did we find? And how much did it change how you trained in your mind of you had said I know I'm pretty aerobic, but.
What did it change? It just made me not as worried about because I would be mid-workout going looking at my heart rate going, what do I do? I'm sitting at 155. I'm like, could be. I feel pretty aerobic here, but I have no idea. So do I need to slow down, or can I just keep pushing?
Which is actually a really great statement of you could repeat all of your mono work at 155 beats.
Oh, no, my mono work was at 135.
Right.
This would be my WODs.
So even better. It is repeatable. It feels easy. But on one point, is it too easy or is it not easy enough?
Yeah. So it just gave me a little bit more confidence to be like, oh, I'm sitting at 155. I'm good. I can do this next set unbroken, and I won't be doing not damage, but I won't be just in that fuck around zone, I guess.
Right. That you would be actually absorbing that training, making those aerobic adaptions so that you can get more strong, more heavy, more skilled at a base where you're going to actually make changes metabolically. So what do we find in your test?
Do we want to look at the previous one all the way back in October first?
Let's look at the previous one in October. What made you work at 135?
So looking at the one in October, there was purple the whole way through.
There was purple the whole way through.
Not a lot, but...
Purple means burning carbohydrates. Purple means stress. Purple means that you have to recover from an effort.
Yeah, and I was not burning a lot of fuel. So looking at, let's say, 135, I was burning... like 8 calories of fat, almost 9 calories of fat a minute, and like 2.5 calories of carbs a minute. So almost just over 12 calories a minute. Okay. Working at 135.
And that's what you had picked for your mono work because
Because I know I picked that because I knew no matter what, 135, I was going to be at least kind of aerobic.
And I can see on this chart that most of the yellow is still winning out. You still have capability to burn fat and use oxygen above that and below that, obviously. So to train your body to use fuel efficiently and absorb that, it was aerobic contractions to get better. That was a great point to have picked.
Yeah, it was just the dummy, no matter what, it might be too easy, but no matter what, I'm being efficient here.
And you're going to build
and I'll be
capacity
better.
there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I had nothing wrong with being able to sit on a rower at 135, being able to do that at 135, there's nothing bad that comes from that.
And your mono work has increased in volume and speed and I know skill because you just started adding
I started getting bored.
So that's an interesting thing too. If you look at some of that stuff is as you're adding in this, base building, this zone 2 base building, for a while it took you just to do just monostructural.
It was literally just row, rest, row, rest, row, rest.
And then we could see you run and run and run and run and not rest so much.
Yeah.
And then you got to the point where your rest involved a skill. Because I know we talked about this in a previous podcast that you were skiing and rope climbing.
Yep. So,
as your aerobic system became more robust, you were able to add more skill in there at that 135.
Yeah, I kind of now my mono has turned into mono structural work plus some sort of high skill practice. Super low volume of it, but some sort of high. So the other day was biker and I was working on my handstand walking. So I was doing my wall walks and then trying to handstand walk away from the wall.
Because you felt good enough at 135 to know you could do that kind of stuff.
Yep. And also because I only have so much time in the day and I need to work on skill. And it was a really easy way of mixing in skill work to the mono work I also needed to do.
Correct. Yeah. So what did your test show 135 to be when we retested you this week?
Ooh, so much more yellow. So 135 was almost all fat. There's little peaks of carbs kind of mixed in there, but comparatively nothing.
And how many calories are you burning in that moment?
Oh boy. All right, let's look here. 135, there's that little peak. I am burning 20 calories of fat a minute.
So you
almost doubled, because there's at 135 at that point there's 0 grams of carbs. Right around there's that little purple peak. So maybe up to 24 calories a minute
working at that rate.
Yeah.
So if we go back to that previous conversation of why we do assessments, why we look at things, why are you monitoring your body composition? Well, then what did we notice when you were able to increase the skill level and the capacity and the speed of what you were doing at 135 beats? And then why is it that you didn't increase the time that you were spending there? Because like you said, you only have so much time in a day. Why were you then losing weight? Well, because you're burning so much more. Your body is responding in a way of giving you fuel to do all the work that you want to do.
I did the math. So most days I sit for roughly an hour, 45 minutes to an hour at 135 beats during my mono stuff. That ends up being 1,200 calories in just my first workout of the day.
And this is an important little aside that if you think about when you wear a heart rate monitor and you monitor on like, say, self loops, and it's going to have you sitting at 135 beats, which is, I don't know, we'll call it 65%. It's not going to give you that reading.
No, that's why like people always ask like, oh, I burned this many calories according to self loops. I'm like, oh, did you?
No, like this is how we know.
It's a good way to gauge. Like what I always tell people is like, that's a good way to gauge day in and day out, like a rough estimate of how hard you work. Because if you normally burn 600 calories in your hour-long workout, according to self loops, and then one day you burn 1,000 calories in that 1 hour, it's like, ooh, that was a really intense, that was a hard day. Or on the other hand, if you only burn 400, you're like, oh, I'm one a little easier today, that's all right. But you can't take that necessarily as that is exactly how many calories I burned in that workout.
No, until you do something like this. And now you can even sit here knowing if you're going to work at 135, you have a really good idea of what you're burning calorically. Yeah. So you know inside and outside of that, then how you're going to fuel yourself, and then also how you're going to need to recover. So if you do something like a workout and you notice you burn like 1,500 calories, that has everything to do with how your body needs that fuel to recover, to adapt, to make changes. Meaning you might need to eat something more that day, or you might need to make sure that you get an extra hour of rest so your body can reabsorb that training and replace those stores in order to not stress yourself out too much.
Exactly. I think recovery is becoming more and more important for me as well too. Right. I think the other day, Tuesday, I was like, oh man, I'm training really hard. Like I've been doing a lot, but I haven't been feeling sore. Camera died, so.
Camera died. We're back.
Yay, we're back.
So, we're talking a little bit about recovery. And the interesting thing is for the amount of time that you spend training, there has to be a balance in life to make sure that you are getting what you want out of your training and still getting what you want out of your life and still like able to wake up and move the next morning, right? So we figured out by watching and monitoring frequently, body composition, and then looking at your metabolic profile to see what you're burning, so we know that we're on track and not stressing you out. You also know what it takes to, like, you prioritize your sleep.
As best I can, to be honest. Like, I'm in the gym at 6 a.m. most mornings, so I get as much sleep as I can.
Right. And you understand, like, there's been a couple days you've been more tired. Today is a good example. You're sore.
I'm very sore.
And you said that often on Thursdays you go out and do a track workout, but you reported today.
Absolutely not. I will not. And it's just my core that's sore, but I don't feel like running at all today.
Which is a super important thing to notice. So much like noticing like you're losing weight and being more hungry, or, realizing like maybe something is not actually lining up, or I'm noticing, I'm not hitting lifts or something. Mm-hmm. Being in tune with everything and then having guidance to be able to do it is really important. So what is next for you now that you have this most amazing metabolic profile? So now you know what 135 looks like for your mono work. We can see where your WOD should be, where we're going to work on the zone 3-4 for more aerobic adaptions.
I think it's just going to be a little bit more confidence going into WODs, like knowing I'm not blowing it out. Like basically looking at this, it would take a lot for me to really blow out a workout to the point where like it'll take a lot where a workout will not adapt. Like I won't create adaptions. I have to really fuck up the workout.
Yeah, which is going to be a really interesting thing to watch you wrap your mind around. As you hit those, you did a couple the other day, you said really, really hard. Your lungs gave out on the one with the big dumbbell.
Yeah, it was like, it's starting to become more like my heart rate and my metabolic system isn't giving out anymore. It is like either my lungs or muscular fatigue or something. Like it's the other thing. Like my aerobic base is now good enough where other things are going to start to fail before my aerobic base does. Which
is then going to change and guide how you move through your programming.
Like I noticed that yesterday. Yesterday I had heavy sled pushes.
Oh.
And I hate sled pushes. But I was pushing the sled and I kept looking at my heart rate and I'm like, I felt like I was freaking dying. And I looked down, I'm at like 150. which looking here real quickly, 150, I am barely pulling carbs.
Right. It was work. That was muscular fatigue.
Oh, yeah. It was just my legs on fire.
Right. And so that now can guide your training. You've earned the right to then look at these workouts and realize like, okay, so those heavy sled pushes, now you have to get stronger. So now you've earned the right to get stronger in that while still balancing out everything else. Now, one concern I often have when I see a profile like this is we open everything up and I'm like, you've earned the right to do whatever you want. You're good. You burn fat, you use oxygen, you feel unstoppable, you're reaching your goals. One concern that I have is without a well-guided program, without still doing a lot of that zone 2 work to keep up your aerobic base, that you could actually, and you've seen this before, slip backwards all the way.
Yeah, I've done it before.
Right, where now it's like, I can do whatever I want. And then you start overtraining because you start overtraining that intensity. It was really important that you noticed that like you were breathing hard with the dumbbell, that your legs were on fire for the sled. And then to guide your training that way and come back down where you're going to be making those aerobic contractions to get stronger and more skilled. Before testing
I don't think zone 2, like mono work isn't going anywhere for me. I'm going to keep like mono work. I don't think my mono sessions are going to change until we hit December of like this year as we get closer to the open. And then it'll start to become a little bit more intense work on the bike and row and ski and whatever.
Because then it ends up being not monostructural, but in a terms of like maintaining an aerobic base, but prepping your nervous system for different energy system training.
Exactly.
And we'll guide you with PNOE through that too.
Yeah. I think the other thing that'll come about of this is like if I did no work without fat. Right.
And so now
in terms of health is great. Like, yay.
Well, and that's it. Like right now you're just building volume. You're starting to build strength. You're building skills. You're building what you're capable of. You're figuring out what's fun.
It's just base building right now.
Right.
But eventually I need to start working in that. And you sent me a post by some, another company that was like talking about bike sprints and being able to build that top end work.
Yeah.
So that is something that I think we're going to slowly start adding in is just, starting off for a month with like 15-second bike sprints and then slowly building that up till I get to 2-3 minute bike sprints.
Yeah. But then also maintaining the fun parts that you love about training too.
Because bike sprints are not fun.
Let's not wait October, November, December, January, February. That was a lot of months in between tests again.
Yeah. That was 8 months.
Yeah.
I guess we cannot do that.
Well, stay tuned. One thing that I want to talk about next time is I want you to do an RMR, and we're going to talk about
I was just about to say
we're going to talk about what Alex's resting metabolic rate looks like, so we can figure out. Now we see what the stress of exercise does to him. Next podcast, we're going to look at what the stress of living his life does to him.
Oh boy, it's stressful.
Stay tuned. Thanks, guys.
Bye, guys.